Hello again. If you look at any group of people playing instruments like violins and flutes in this country, whether children learning the instruments or adults playing professionally in an orchestra, you will at once see that almost all of them are white, with a few people of Indian or Chinese heritage as well. It's unlikely that anybody in the group will be black. This is referred to in this children's book about which I spoke the other day. You see the picture here, which is pretty much like real life. A group of white children playing classical music and no black children involved. Here's another situation where you will find mostly white people with a small number of Indians and people of Chinese ancestry, and that's librarians and archivists. Hardly any black people in that setting either. There are, these are two random instances. There are many more. It's thought to be desirable to diversify such groups, to use the modern jargon, and stop them being so white. One way of doing such things is to ask ourselves why so many archivists, say, are white. Well, they studied some relevant subject at university, qualified perhaps as archivists, and have a degree, previous experience in the field, that sort of thing, which means that they have an edge when going for jobs in that line of work. All this kind of thing tends to perpetuate white dominance in that field. What can we do about it? One way is what you might call a quick fix. In the description to this video, I give a link to the archives of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, who are desperately trying to decolonise their archive. Because they wish to be more inclusive, which means in plain terms that one thing they want is more black people working in the archives, they have announced proudly that we have been working with these principles for 2 years now and regularly reflect on the areas that we have progressed in our service. One area we've worked on recently is recruitment. We've reviewed our recruitment practices, and for the recent recruitment of the archives assistant, we removed the requirement for the applicant to have an undergraduate degree or to have experience in an archive, which we now realise was very limiting for people to get into the profession. In plain language, this means that they hope to get fewer qualified archivists applying for the job and more people without degrees or previous experience. In this way, it is hoped that black people will, so to speak, be given a leg up into the field. Most of us would assume, though, that this will simply mean poor quality archivists and people getting a job that they don't know much about and may not be able to do very well. It is also, by the way, a horribly patronising approach to black people themselves. In many, perhaps most state schools, what is perceived as difficult music, that is to say orchestral works, are no longer played for the children so that they can learn to appreciate them. Children learning to play violins and pianos have largely been scrapped. Instead of classical music, which is widely viewed as elitist, children are instead given pop music, African drumming and free-form dance. These are two ways of making two things, classical music and the world of archivists, more diverse, or in other words, making sure that such things are not exclusively white. In the case of archives, one scraps the need for qualifications and experience to make it easier for black people to get jobs, and in the case of classical music in schools, one simply does away with it entirely. Anybody who was at school 50 years ago and has some experience of modern schools will know what I'm talking about here. These then are both ways of arranging it so that black people, whether adults or children, are not left out, and it prevents all white settings from existing. That's the quick and lazy way. A better way would be to work to raise educational standards in schools by making sure that children learn to appreciate classical music, that all children had the opportunity to learn the violin, that all children, whether in state or independent schools, were able to join a youth orchestra. Do that for 5 or 10 or 20 years, and as a matter of course you will find black children in orchestras, black children playing the violin, and black adults playing classical music. In other words, by putting in the work and levelling up rather than levelling down, we will achieve the same aim as if we did it quickly. The same thing could be done when it comes to subjects studied at universities. Useless courses could lose funding and other courses could be promoted. In that way, black children would go on to university and become archivists or librarians in the same way that white people do now. This would be levelling up. The present system simply means destroying things and lowering standards so that nobody appears elitist. This reduces our children and young people rather than raising them up. Both black people and white are damaged by lowering standards in the way that is currently happening.